Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So this morning's webinar is going to be thinking all about surviving lockdown with children, with babies and toddlers particularly, which is a big challenge at the moment. We've never found ourselves in this situation before. So I'm going to be thinking a little bit about that this morning. And for those of you who don't know me, my name's Dr. Ellen Craig. I'm a clinical psychologist and I work with the Hertfordshire Community Perinatal Mental Health Team. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you now so you can see my slides. Okay, here we are. All right. So, surviving lockdown with babies and children. It's a challenge. I just wanted to start off with this. This is a quote from a friend of mine who lives in New Zealand, has two small girls. And something that she said in a very flippant way was, well, surviving each other is our biggest challenge. And that really resonated for me. And I suspect it may do for a lot of other people out there as well. So I just wanted to actually just start off by acknowledging how very, very tricky this is. And to show you my two that I'm currently trying to survive with. So these are my boys, Robin and Charlie, who are nearly 6 and 3.5. And they've been getting up to all sorts of mischief recently. I also just wanted to share another of my experiences that I've had recently, right at the beginning of today's session. So I was sent this picture on the left. I don't know if perhaps some of you might be familiar with Labyrinth, the film back from the 80s. And at the top there, the picture of, actually this is the baby's sister, older sister, saying me, I can bear no longer, Goblin King, wherever you may be, take this child of mine far away from me, which is a theme in the film if you're not familiar. And down there is the Goblin King, who says, we're currently experiencing high volume. Please stay on the line. Your call is important to me. So there's a lot of these kind of things doing the rounds at the moment. And I had a real kind of roller coaster response to that, which I think really speaks to the kind of emotions that we're all facing right now, and the kind of challenges we're trying to navigate. So immediately I was quite relieved and I thought, oh, that's very funny. Thank goodness somebody else is feeling the same as me. In fact, so many people are feeling the same as me that somebody's created this meme to send around. But then I was suddenly hit by a sort of wave of guilt and thought, oh, my poor kids. I really shouldn't be thinking that way about them. And then another wave of, well, I shouldn't be feeling that, is perhaps I should be coping a bit better. So I don't know if anybody out there can sort of identify with that pattern of response as well. Actually, this is incredibly hard. I'm not, there's bits of it I'm really not enjoying. I'd quite like it to be over in many ways. But then also this kind of secondary wave of guilt that seems to kind of hit us quite quickly about the way that we're feeling at the moment. So I think this just kind of speaks to the complexity of the situation and the kind of different layers of emotions that are probably whirling around at the moment and impacting on us quite a lot. So this morning I'm going to be talking about a few things. I'm going to start off by thinking about how our mindset as parents is going to influence the way that we're coping and the way that we're managing and the way that we're kind of tackling this lockdown period with kids. I'm going to really focus on thinking about our expectations of ourselves as parents, a compassionate thinking style, and also this idea of a challenge mindset, which can be quite helpful right now. So I'm going to go through those in a little bit more detail for you in a second. I'm going to move on to thinking about how babies, toddlers and children are emotional sponges, and they are going to pick up on the emotional tone of what's around them, and the impact of that and what we can do about that. I'm going to think about a really, really important topic, which is regulating our own emotions so that we can regulate other people's emotions, little people's emotions, because that's one of our main tasks at the moment, I think, managing our own emotions so that we can manage children's emotions. Then I'm going to come on to think about what we know from research, what the research has told us into what babies, toddlers and children need from us as parents, which can give us a bit of a focus to our time at the moment, how to spend our days, what we need to be prioritising. And I'm going to finish just by thinking about some very quick tips on managing behaviour, because I know that can be really challenging at the moment for a lot of people. So broadly speaking, I'm going to start off with some a bit of a focus on us as parents and how we're thinking about the current time, and then moving on to think a little bit more about specifically babies and toddlers as well. Okay. So just to put this in a little bit of context, we know that parenting under normal conditions is an extremely challenging job. It's very grueling. It's very uplifting and rewarding often, but it's also very, very hard anyway, let alone in the current context of lockdown. We're really struggling to find breaks. It can feel particularly relentless. It can feel a bit like you're stuck in Groundhog Day. And added into that mix are all the emotions that we're currently feeling as well. People are worried, stressed. We don't know really what the future holds. Lockdown might be affecting our mood as well as parents. We might be feeling quite fed up or even a bit low. And really crucially, we don't have access to our usual coping strategies. And I know a lot of people are struggling with not having access to their usual sources of quite practical support as well. So not having grandparents available to pop in and just give them a bit of respite from childcare, or even friends too. And if you're single parenting, that is particularly hard as well, as this is really, really challenging without support. It's particularly relentless. So really kind of worth being quite mindful of that as well, I think. If you're in the postnatal period, we know this is a period of huge adjustment and transition anyway. And under lockdown, that's going to look quite different. Your pregnancy, the birth, maternity leave might not be looking how you'd imagined it to look. So there may also be kind of disappointments or losses that you've got to kind of sit with and process around that too. Bonding as well. I think it's worth just mentioning bonding too. Bonding with baby is not always a straightforward process. It can often take quite a lot of time. There can be good days and bad days. Can really ebb and flow. And I think that can also bring with it challenges and emotions as well. And again, under lockdown, that might feel particularly intense if that's something that you're worrying about too. But I also just wanted to say that we know that antenatally, postnatally, this kind of perinatal period that we think of is a time when mums and dads can be quite vulnerable to mental health difficulties anyway, under normal circumstances. And so as mental health professionals, we're really aware of that. And I really want to stress this point that if you feel like you're not coping, please, please, please do get in touch with your GP. They're probably operating a little bit differently, perhaps just over the telephone or online, but most GP surgeries are still open, and I know that our team is still open and accepting referrals, very much accepting referrals. So I am really keen to say that at this point, if you are really struggling, if you feel like you need some extra support right now, please do get in touch with somebody, whether that's your GP, if you've got a health visitor or a midwife, our team, your family centre. They're operating through Facebook and online quite a lot as well, but they are still there. And so do please reach out if you feel like you need a little bit of extra support at this time, because it's tough anyway, let alone at the moment. All right, and I'm going to really kind of focus on this quite key message I think is really vital for us to hold in mind at the moment, that we've got to be looking after ourselves in order to look after other people, to have the energy, the kind of mental capacity, the mental resources that we need to look after other people. We've got to be looking after ourselves first. So we must look after ourselves first. We cannot pour from an empty cup. I think that's really important. Time to yourself is vital, and you can't look after other people if you're depleted and exhausted. And this has to be sustainable. So worth giving that a little bit of thought, I think, right at the beginning. What am I doing to look after myself? Is there anything else I can be doing? What can I squeeze into these busy days? Excuse me, that is just for me. That's going to help recharge my batteries. So that's really, really an important kind of underlying message that provides one of the foundations for this presentation. Okay, so I wanted to share with you this graph that I came across. I was watching a presentation on supporting frontline staff who are working in hospitals at the moment. And I was listening to this lady who is a professor of stress medicine in America. I was listening to her speaking about this pattern that they see in healthcare workers who are looking after people with coronavirus in hospital. And I thought, well, that's not dissimilar to what happens for us as parents throughout the course of the day. I think probably the caring roles hopefully are a bit different, and perhaps it's not quite so acutely stressful. But I think it's a similar kind of pattern that might happen to us. So this is looking at the way that stress builds up throughout the day. And we've got a red line there, which is somebody who is kind of constantly exposed to stress. They're not taking breaks, they're not taking respite, they're not taking time away from their duties. And you can see how that stress level just kind of builds up constantly throughout the day. And that's leaving them in a really bad place at the end of the day there, at the end of their shift, or when they're needing to go home and relax. It's going to be really hard to do. And they're probably going to start the next day not in a great place as well. So I thought, this does, in some ways, really look like a pattern that we might be vulnerable to as parents looking after babies and children during the day. And the blue line underneath it shows somebody who is taking regular breaks, who's taking regular respite, pauses, time out from those really kind of intense duties. And you can see that their level of stress build-up looks quite different. Yeah, they're ending the day on a slightly higher stress level than they started, but it's not nearly quite so steep an incline. And they're taking pauses throughout the day to kind of just bring that stress level down, reset a little bit. So I was really thinking about applying this to parenting throughout the day, and particularly mindful that often, if we are on that kind of red trajectory, by the time we get to one of the most stressful times of the day, which is bedtime, we really are on a short fuse by that point. We don't have much capacity left to kind of tolerate tantrums or tolerate challenges or difficulties or things not going according to plan. So I quite like the look of this blue line underneath with these regular pauses that just help kind of reset those stress levels a little bit. And I just really, I suppose, wanted to share that with you and just encourage you to think about that pattern over your day. And taking regular breaks in whatever way that you can. So don't try to make it until bedtime. I think there's a bit of a tendency, well, I'm just going to push on, get everything done until bedtime, then I can relax. And I suppose I was reflecting on, well, I wonder if there's a slightly different way of doing that, taking more regular breaks. And thinking about what that might look like for you, I guess, as well. Like what is a break? What can a break be? Is it sit in the garden with a cup of tea? Is it sitting the kids in front of the telly for half an hour while you just sit and chill out? And just really thinking what that could look like, just to take the intensity off it a little bit. Related to that as well, I also wanted to bring in this idea of babies being born expecting other people around them. So we know that when babies are born, they immediately attach really strongly to their mum. So they know the sound of their mum's voice, they know the smell of their mum very, very quickly. But also research is showing that babies' brains are wired to actually expect other people and to be interested in other people. So we know that babies come into the world ready to be with other people as well as their mum. And I think it can be quite hard to remember this if you've got a new baby. There can often be a bit of a sense that all the responsibility falls to mum, or that you have to shoulder it all. But if there is a partner available, then do use them, because we know babies are born ready for this. Okay. And just again, making that point that we need this respite at the moment. We need respite from parenting. We cannot do it 24/7 at full intensity. We need to be able to kind of pull back, get a bit of respite, have a pause. Okay, and if anybody has been to any of my previous webinars, you might have heard me talking about this before. So I think this is really important, again, at the moment. So I wanted to just talk about the idea of rules and expectations that we hold for ourselves, particularly in the context of parenting. So we all have, in life generally, we all have these rules for living. They're sort of ideas about how we should behave, things that we should be doing or not doing. We're not always aware that they're there. They usually come to light when we break those standards and expectations, and then we're quite aware of them. But generally speaking, they often just kind of tick over. So these sort of rules for living might be something like, oh, I should always try my best, or I should care for other people. They develop during our childhood, usually from messages that we pick up from our parents or from the culture around us, from school, from our friends when we're a little bit older. Importantly, when they develop, they're really helpful. However, they need to be flexible as we get older and encounter different challenges. If they're not flexible, then they trip us up. So, for example, I should always try my best. It's a good one, but it might, if you stick to it too rigidly, that might cause you some trouble a bit later in life. You might find that you're putting far too much into things. So the same applies for parenting as well. We all have rules for ourselves as parents, guidelines that we'd quite like to stick to. So, I must cook fresh food for them as often as possible, or the kids should be asleep by 7:30, or I've got to bring them up to be responsible, upstanding members of the community. And there's different areas that we're going to have these rules, these sort of parenting rules for ourselves within. Eating, the food that they're having, the way that they're socialising, who they're socialising with, standards of behaviour, screen time, I think is a biggie. That's one that's tricky right now. And perhaps within that, ideas around time that you need for yourself or not. So I think it's really important that we think about what our rules and expectations are for ourselves as parents, probably. And just to think about, what are they flexible enough? They developed under very different circumstances. I mean, unless you've had a baby in the last kind of couple of months, probably your rules and expectations for parenting developed outside of lockdown. So we can't really expect to stick to them very, very strictly now. And if we try to, it's going to become really stressful for us, I think. We're all going to have good and bad days. And on trickier days, we're going to need to be able to relax our expectations. So it might be, that idea I have in my head about just an hour's screen time a day for the kids. Maybe they need a screen day today, because quite frankly, I need a day off. So that would be an example of just making these rules a little bit more flexible. It's only temporary. You could relax your rules just on tricky days where you feel like you need a bit of respite, or perhaps even the kids need a bit of respite. And we can reinstate them once this is over, or once we can be a bit more relaxed. I think something that can help us with this is holding on to a sense of perspective. In the general scheme of things, this isn't going to be much time. In the general scheme of things, it feels like a long time now, but for example, when your son's 18, the fact that he spent a summer running around naked in the garden is probably not going to amount to a huge deal. So I think it can help us to just kind of think through, well, how will this feel in a year's time? Will it matter if I've given quite a lot of freezer food over the last month? Is that going to matter in a year's time? And also bring into that consideration the cost benefit analysis in the longer term, including for you. Is, for example, you've got the options of getting the freezer food out, or cooking a fresh meal for them. Get the freezer food out and sit with them and watch telly for half an hour while that's cooking. What's the cost benefit analysis of that? You get a bit of downtime, kids get a bit of downtime with you, and they have a bit of freezer food. So I think these are kind of questions that it's worth us asking ourselves at the moment. We've really got to think about sustainability, what's going to make this sustainable at the moment, and consider that we're in quite a different mode at the moment. We are in sort of survival mode. We've got to get through the day. This is not about kind of setting up their healthy eating habits, or their screen time habits, or their school habits. This is not what we're doing at the moment. We're getting to the end of the day. So I think this is a really important thing for us to just kind of reflect on at the moment, and try and introduce this flexibility wherever we can, and be comfortable with it as well. Just wanted to pop a slide in here about TV. I know this is something we're struggling in my household at the moment. So it can be a bit tricky to manage currently. You might find that the kids are pestering for TV. There's quite an urge to pop the TV on, but similarly that can come with a sense of, well, should I really be doing that? It's not so good for the kids. So I just wanted to pull together some of the research about TV and children that we know, which I think is quite helpful currently. So I think we're all quite fixated on the idea of the quantity of TV that they're watching. So they shouldn't, be watching 4 hours of telly straight. But actually, it's not so much about the quantity of telly they're watching, but it's the quality that's important, that we need to be thinking of. So we know that violence is never good. I'm sure you guys know that too. But there's plenty of good quality TV out there, which the research is telling us we don't need to worry particularly about them watching. The ways to really enhance that is to turn this into a social activity. So watch the telly with them. And I do really mean with them. So don't sit there on your phone, or don't sit trying to do some work. Actually kind of participate and join in and watch it with them. That shared focus of attention for children, for babies and toddlers and older children, is really, really enriching. If they feel like you're both sharing this activity, it's a really nice, good quality time for them. So think about having that shared focus of attention, and enjoy the jokes together, but also crucially, take that learning from that program and try and apply it to their day-to-day life. So take it forward for them, talk about it outside the program. So I just pulled on a couple of programs here. So for example, try the game that Bing played, or talk about that worry that Bing had outside of the television program, or draw the dolphin that the Octonauts rescued, for example. And in that way, you can really kind of take the goodness out of the television program. So key messages from that then, right? Think about it's the quality of TV that's important, not so much the quantity, and really kind of sharing that with the kids and taking it into their day-to-day life, taking the learning forward from it. Those are the important things. Okay, and just a little nod again about the importance of flexibility in these different areas that we all as parents are going to have rules and expectations around. And when I say rules and expectations, I'm talking about our expectations of ourselves as parents, really. That I should be bathing the children every day. You know, I should be breastfeeding the baby. Whereas perhaps now it's time to introduce a little bit of combo feeding just to relieve the pressure a little bit, for example. Or I should be doing 2 hours straight of homeschooling. All this stuff really needs to be flexible right now. Watch out for those shoulds and musts. They are a bit of a warning that there's some inflexibility there. So if you find yourself thinking that or feeling that, then just reflect on that. Where can I make this more flexible? Okay. I think also related to that is this idea of self-compassion as parents. We tend to be very critical of ourselves. As soon as we become parents, we're terrible at focusing on what we haven't done rather than what we have done. And there's also a sense, I think, often of comparing ourselves to other parents. And I think social media doesn't help with that either. You know, there's a lot of photos out there on social media of parents doing happy, wholesome activities with their children, which can really impact on us. I think we can end up with a bit of a sense that that's what everybody else is doing all of the time, and that we're really failing to do that. And we completely forget what we have been doing. And also that actually that's a little snapshot of that person's day that may or may not be the right portrayal. So kind of thinking about what the effect of that is on us, of this kind of, you know, being quite critical and thinking, well, I should have done that better. Why didn't I do that? Why am I not able to do that? It's going to make us feel pretty demoralized, demotivated, quite low, eventually. So it's more important than ever now for us to be kind, compassionate, supportive and encouraging of ourselves. We need to be our own cheerleader right now. That's going to give us that little extra motivation, the little extra energy that we need to get through this period. So the first step is just to catch that self-critical thinking and just replace it with something more compassionate. So if you notice yourself thinking, well, I'm not coping with the cooking, then what is a more compassionate way of looking at that? What would a friend say to you? What would you advise a friend? You know, I'm doing the best I can. If they have the same dinner twice in a row, they live on plain pasta for a few days, you know, in the general scheme of things, it's not something to worry about right now. So have to take that really kind of compassionate, kind approach to yourselves. Reflect on what we've achieved and done well. That should be where your focus is right now. Like, I felt really rotten this morning, but I got up and got the kids dressed and got them breakfast. Okay. All right, so I also just wanted to think quickly about our thinking style. So we know that when we're in a stressful situation, generally, be that lockdown or exam time or, you know, or anything at all, the way that we think about that is really, really key to the way that we feel and the way that we behave in that situation. So the way we think about stress and challenges is crucial in determining how we manage. And I just wanted to highlight that for you as well, with this example. So if you find yourself at some point in the day thinking, oh, this is awful, I cannot do this, I'm just too stressed, this is too much, the impact of that on your mood and your behaviour is going to be quite profound. So your mood's going to dip, you might feel depressed, anxious, angry, guilty, shamed, big emotions, and also you're quite likely just to, you know, slump, give up. I just can't put the effort in. Versus this other way of looking at things, which is again more compassionate, a bit of flexibility in there. So I'm doing the best I can right now, and what I'm doing is meaningful, and we'll get through this. So that approach is going to have a different impact on your emotions. Hopefully you'll feel a little bit more lifted. Hopefully it won't trigger anxiety or worry. it just sets you up a little bit better. You're more likely to have a bit of energy having had that thought as well, a bit of motivation, crucially. So it's kinder, it's much kinder, it's more encouraging, it's less catastrophic, and it's probably more accurate. If you think back to all the times in the past when you thought, oh, I can't do this, and then you probably have got on and done it, you might be surprised. So we know that those two different thinking styles are going to really impact on our behaviour and the way that we kind of face them and the way that we look after our kids. And we also know that these two different mindsets actually have a different kind of physiological response in our body, in the nature of the stress response. It's really interesting. So it's quite profound, these two different thinking styles. And we can think about the second one as what we call a challenge mindset. So this is a difficult situation, but I can do something about it. So that's the challenge mindset. If you can find that place, you'll be doing really well. You won't be there all the time, no way. But if you can be there 2 or 3 times a day, then that might just give you a bit of extra oomph to kind of get through. I wanted to just kind of illustrate that again with a picture. It's not a great picture, but this is the start of the London Marathon. And I suspect these are possibly the elite athletes at the front. But they will very much be in this challenge mindset place. So they will be thinking, I've got this, I can do this. The people that are more the kind of other mindset, so this, I can't do that, I can't cope with this, they probably haven't even signed up for this. And I count myself amongst that when it comes to marathons. But I just thought that was quite a nice example of this challenge mindset. And you can imagine the different kind of physiological response that these guys are having in their body as well. So they're having a degree of stress, having a degree of a stress response, but it's that slightly more helpful stress response, the kind of idea of a challenge that I can rise to, I can get through this. Okay, so moving on then to think about babies and children a bit more specifically right now. So we know babies, toddlers and children are emotional sponges. So they will pick up on the emotional tone around them. They'll pick up on our mood. If we're stressed, or if we're a bit distracted or less present or less motivated than normal, they will sense this. Even really teeny tiny babies will sense stress in us. And whilst it's really important and helpful for children to see us experiencing emotions and then handling them well, and we do need to keep an eye on this at the moment as well. We need to be quite mindful of this. So generally, levels of anxiety and stress and worry are much higher at the moment. So kind of in a preventative way, deep breathing exercises and relaxation exercises will really help with that, to kind of just keep that a bit moderated. So as much deep breathing as you can, first thing in the morning, throughout the day, as you go to bed. Breathe from your diaphragm, longer out breath than in breath. I've talked about this in previous webinars. In fact, I think this is one that I've mentioned in every single webinar. So it's obviously a key one. So deep breathing and any relaxation exercises that you find useful will be good for this generally, just kind of keeping an eye on this. The calmer we are, we know the calmer that babies and children and toddlers are. However, I'm sure we can all relate to this. A crying baby or a tantruming toddler makes us feel anything but calm. So we can end up in a bit of a vicious spiral where our stress is escalating and the babies, the toddlers are picking up on that. And yeah, I'm sure we can all kind of connect with that idea. And also, you know, soothing a crying baby is going to be very, very difficult if you are feeling very anxious or overwhelmed. So one of the first things we do to soothe the baby is hold them close to us, and often close to our heart. And babies tune into that very, very quickly. They tune into that. They pick up on what's going on in our bodies. So it's really, really important to try to regulate our own emotions before we try to regulate a crying baby. So if we're kind of operating in this kind of background level of stress and anxiety, babies are going to pick up on that and they're going to be harder to soothe. I think it's worth saying here as well that we've all got to appreciate that babies are going to cry. There's no baby that does not cry. So that is something that we're going to have to deal with day to day with new babies. But if we're feeling anxious or overwhelmed, it's going to make that really hard for us to manage. So I mentioned kind of just generally trying to stay calmer, using breathing strategies, relaxation exercises, anything that works for you. But I'm going to also introduce you to another skill, which is to use in moments where you feel really, really overwhelmed. I mean, also, as I've put here, also for a toddler losing their rag, you know, that is also very kind of triggering for us. It can be very overwhelming. If we're stressed, it's going to be really hard for us to kind of regulate a tantruming toddler. And this skill that I'm going to just talk through now can be really helpful in these moments. I'm going to come to it in just a second. One more slide first. So those moments where you think you might explode. So can't soothe baby, toddler's just, you know, lost his rag. I really relate to this picture. I've had moments where I've very much felt like this. Hopefully I haven't quite looked the same as that, but you never know, I may well have done. But the urge to shout, scream, or just run away can be extremely strong. It can be really, really physical urges that we feel in these moments. And we really need to regulate ourselves first. You cannot regulate a child, soothe a child when you're in this place. And this is a very normal, natural place to be. But we just need to prioritise regulating our own emotions before we can then attend to a child's emotions. It's that idea of putting on your own oxygen mask before putting on the child's oxygen mask. So a simple way of doing this is just to take 5 deep, slow breaths before responding. Shoulders down, breathe from your diaphragm, long out breath. And that will just give you a pause, will give you some headspace. It will just bring that emotional level down. There's also the stop technique, which is what I'm going to just talk you through. So this is a technique to use when you're feeling very overwhelmed, and it will bring down the intensity of that emotion so you can think straight, so you can think about what you need to do next. So it's an anagram, and the S stands for stop. So stop, physically freeze, don't move. Because when we're in this place, as I said, the urges to react are very, very strong. And if we can just stop and physically freeze and don't react, it's going to be a good start. Take a step back, either literally or figuratively in your mind, if you can. If you're trying to manage a screaming baby, you may need to put baby down somewhere safe, in the cot, on a mat somewhere, and literally take a step back. If you can, if it's safe to do so, take a step out of the room. Take a breath, take that deep breath. If you've got a tantruming toddler, you may not be able to go too far away, but do whatever you can just to take that step back, literally or in your mind. And then observe is the next step. So this is a really important one. Observe what's going on for you. Observe the emotions that are kind of bubbling, swirling. Observe what physical sensations are going round and round in your body. Observe what thoughts are in your head. What's going on? What's triggered this for you? And as we know that as soon as you start to kind of label emotions and step out of them slightly, they do reduce in intensity straight away. We've seen that with MRI studies of the brain. When emotions are really strongly activated, when you just label them, recognize them, actually the brain activity decreases a little bit. So we call that name it to tame it. Works with toddlers as well. So that observe step is really key, just to giving you a little bit of distance. And then the P is for proceed mindfully. So then you're in a position to think, well, what do I need to do next? Do I need to get my partner to come in? Do I need to try something different to soothe the baby? Do I need to just take baby, put the telly on, everybody sit down? You know, what's the next step here? And by that point, hopefully the emotional intensity will have reduced a little bit, so you can think straight, figure out what to do. So that's a good one to have in your repertoire for managing these really intense moments. Okay. So moving on then, the next couple of slides are about different sorts of, different kinds of early years programs that tell us a little bit about what babies and children and toddlers need in their days. So this one's called 5 to Thrive. This is a really lovely program. This is aimed at the very early years. I think it goes up to 3, but I often think about it just in terms of 0 to 1, so the little babies. And these blocks here along the right hand side of the screen show what babies need in their days in order to have a healthy brain. So this is quite a sort of neurological message we're giving here. This is so that baby kind of builds the right kind of neural connections in order to build good relationships and to feel secure later in their life. So this is what they need. They need you to talk to them, to play with them, to relax with them, to cuddle them, and to respond to them. So they're quite simple messages. You don't have to do this all the time, crucially, okay? It's important for babies to know that you're there for them and that you see them and that they're safe with you. But also too much stimulation is tiring for babies. It gets quite overwhelming for babies. So don't feel like you have to be playing with them for long periods of time or for the whole day. This really is kind of little short bursts of these things. And it's very much kind of responding to their cues when they're ready for this. So when baby's nice and alert and looking at you, looking around the room, that might be the time to play with them, to dangle a toy in front of their face or something. But do look out for signs that baby's ready to kind of just switch off from that a little bit. It can be very stimulating for babies interacting with you, even just kind of smiling at you or holding eye contact with you can be very stimulating. It can be a very intense experience for babies. So what you'll see is that they regulate that. They're very good at regulating that. They might look away and then come back to you when they're ready to interact again. That's not a sign that baby is bored or doesn't love you. That's just a sign that they're regulating what's going on for them inside. And you'll see that with babies a lot. They'll look away and they'll come back when they're ready to re-engage. So we can be very led by the babies with this as well. And this is a really important point. You only need to get this right 30% of the time. So research has shown you do not have to get it right with baby 100% of the time. 30% is fine. That will do. So I think this is also really important to hold in mind, particularly at the moment. Baby does not need perfection, far from it. Baby needs you to get it right 30% of the time. A lot of the time with this stuff we're guessing as parents. That's fine. That's fine. But I think this is a really nice, helpful little message. If you can remember these 5 things, respond, cuddle, relax, play, and talk, then you'll be doing just fine. Because I think, particularly if you're feeling a little bit anxious at the moment, or if you're a bit of an anxious mummy, the tendency can be to try to do too much, which is tiring for everybody. And if we can just hold on to these main messages, these are the important things, then it can be really helpful, I think, in guiding us at the moment. Okay, so I wanted to tell you about another model of parenting, of what this particularly kind of relates to what our roles are as parents. And this model goes up to, I think, teenage years, but I'm just going to be thinking about it in terms of little babies, toddlers mostly. Okay. So it's this idea of the circle of security. And you can see there are some hands there on the left-hand side. And then there's a circle, a line drawn as a circle that goes out past the tree, turns around, comes back to the hands. This is an idea, this is the whole idea of the circle of security. This is what children do naturally, and this is what they need. This allows them to learn about the world, but also to know that as parents, you're their safe base, you're their security. Okay. If this stuff is in place, again, you're doing a brilliant job. And again, I thought this would be useful just to kind of explore a little bit now, and it might help kind of shape our days right now, just to help guide us to prioritize things or to know what to do. So children go out exploring the world on the top of the circle there. So you can see a little girl with her trolley there. And children need us to support their exploration. So they need to go out. They need to go and learn and discover and explore. And that's going to look quite different depending on what age we're thinking about. So with newborn babies, this might look like them just glancing around the room with sort of hazy eyes. And then they might come back to you, or they might start crying, which is a signal that they want to come back to you. With toddlers who are mobile, particularly, you might see them go out to explore. They might go off to the other side of the room and have a little poodle around over there. And then at some point, they'll come back on the circle. They'll come back to you. They might check in with you. They might look to you. They might call to you. Might just be a quick glance over the shoulder, or they might be distressed and come back to you for some comfort. With older kids, you see this too as well. Again, it looks quite different. But you see this pattern throughout the lifespan, actually. Even us, as grown-ups, as adults, we've got a secure base. Hopefully we've all got a secure base that's quite reassuring to know that it's there, whether that's our parents or friends or our partner. And we will kind of regularly, in different ways, check in that they're still there for us. They're still a safe haven we can go back to. But so when we're thinking about children, and if we're thinking about children kind of on this circle that they need to do, so they go out to explore, and our tasks as parents, while they're going out to explore, is watching over them, delighting in them, helping them, and enjoying with them. So watching over them, keeping a watchful eye, don't have to be kind of staring continually, but just a sense that they're somewhere and they're safe. We know where they are and they're safe. Delighting in them. Now, they're not always delightful, but when we can, showing that we're pleased to see them, smile, helping them if they need help. They might bring something to you for help, or you might need to go to them for help, and enjoying something with them. So again, that kind of idea of the shared focus of attention, that you're sharing something together. So that's our role as parents while they're going out on the top of the circle. And then on the bottom of the circle, as they're coming in, our role as parents is to welcome them coming to us. Now, that can be quite hard if we're trying to do 6 things at once and the toddler's coming to us screaming. That's really tricky. And it may not be that we have to immediately drop everything and go and give them a great big cuddle. It may just, we need to recognise, let them know that we know they're coming. You know, I'll be with you in a minute, darling. Or just one hand out, whatever you can manage. But this idea that we need to welcome them coming back to us. And then more specifically, so protect them, comfort them, delight in them again, and organise their feelings. So protect me, comfort me, delight in me, and crucially organise my feelings. So if your little one, if your baby's crying, if your toddler's crying, this is where we need to be able to kind of label their emotions and help them with their emotions, because they're essentially quite new to the business of emotions, and we need to show them what's going on for them and how to handle it, basically. So organise their feelings. And we are the hands as parents. We are the hands. And there's some little mottos down below at the bottom of this page about how to be the hands. I think are quite helpful. So always be bigger, stronger, wiser and kind. Whenever possible, follow my child's need, and wherever necessary, take charge. Just also bearing in mind that we only need to get this right 30% of the time. That is enough. But I think this is quite interesting, and particularly now at the moment. So whenever possible, follow my child's need. Let them go out and explore. You follow them. You know, you don't have to be constantly by their side, playing with them, stimulating them. You know, children need that space to go and follow their own little interests or desires, with you watching over them, sharing that with them. But again, I think this can be quite a helpful message, particularly at the moment if we're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the demands of parenting, whether that's teeny tiny babies or toddlers, is that we can take that step back occasionally. We can follow their lead. That's important for them. So that can offer us a little bit of respite as well, I think, if we recognise that. Okay, so I hope that's been a bit helpful understanding that model. It's a very lovely idea, and it's kind of all based in research. So it's quite a good thing to hold in mind, to hold on to if you can. All right, so I'm just very quickly going to think about managing behaviour. So this can be, I think this is probably quite a challenge for a lot of people at the moment, whether this is kind of toddlers or older children. Their routines are being disrupted. They're probably picking up on a degree of worry and stress, so their behaviour is going to change. I think at the moment we can probably predict that. You might notice a whole host of different behaviour changes. They might be clingy, their sleep might regress a bit, might get quite disturbed. You might notice tearfulness or crying, agitation, restlessness, can't stand still, some whining or whinging, perhaps some more tantrums, or being very quick to snap, short fuse, or even kind of withdrawing. Just to name a few, there's a whole lot of different kind of behaviour changes you might notice currently. They may well regress in behaviours as well. So they may go back to being interested in breastfeeding or breastfeeding more, particularly if we're around them more than we normally are. Toilet training might slip a little bit. Perhaps eating behaviours might slip a bit. It can be really helpful to have a flexible routine for getting up, having meal times, exercise, even homeschooling if you're trying to do a bit of that. I think it's important for the routine to be flexible, as I put in there. It shouldn't become stressful, but children do respond quite well to routines. You might be aware of, if you've got a school-age child, how much they enjoy the classroom routine. But yeah, it needs to be flexible too. So crucially, we want to be using positive reinforcement, which is all to do with praising good behaviour and ignoring bad behaviour. Remember that any attention from us, even negative attention from bad behaviour, that's stimulating for them. So try and really kind of ignore the bad behaviour if you can, if it's safe to do that. Ignore the bad behaviour. Plenty of praise for the good behaviour. Simply name the behaviours that you want to see. So rather than saying don't make a mess, say, oh, can you tidy those toys up? So plenty of kind of positive messages. Watch out for our expectations of them. Again, they'll need to be flexible at the moment. Their behaviour is very, very likely to change. And I think sometimes we can expect them to be perfectly behaved all the time. We know that they have got a particular standard of behaviour that they can do, but they're not going to be able to do that all the time at the moment. So I think we need to have flexible expectations of them. They're going through an odd time at the moment. Make time in the day to give them undivided attention. It doesn't have to be long, particularly if you're trying to work or get household jobs done. We don't have to spend hours playing with them. Again, remember the circle of security. It's really important for them to spend some time kind of exploring, following their own lead. And just remembering that 5 minutes of your undivided attention for a little one is a long time. It goes a long way. And also they sense when you're not quite present with them, I've noticed. So I noticed this yesterday with my nearly 6-year-old watching telly. I was trying to catch up on some messages on my phone, and I thought it was probably enough that I was just sitting next to him, but actually he really nagged me, no, Mummy, watch it. We were watching Paw Patrol. And he was really aware, even though he was looking at the telly, he could really sense that I wasn't engaged in what he wanted me to be engaged in. I didn't have that shared focus of attention. And if you can predict when the bad behaviour is going to happen and problem solve ahead of time around it. So if you know that bedtimes are really tricky, do whatever you can in advance to make that as easy for you and the kids as possible. and prepare yourself emotionally. So if you know there's particular points in the day where you struggle the most emotionally, you know, get some downtime in first. You know, prepare yourself emotionally. Think about what's going to help you get through that situation the best way that you can. Okay, I'm going to come back to the slide. First of all, I just wanted to show you this book, which the points on the previous slide are taken from this book. This is a wonderful, wonderful book, No Drama Discipline, written by Daniel Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. Daniel Siegel has written several books along these lines, and they're very, very good books. They're based on research and evidence. They're very accessible little parenting tips and strategies for every parent, and it's an easy read. I think they both appreciate. I think they're both parents. They both appreciate that it's hard for parents to sit down and read a book, but this is very accessible, written in quite small chunks. And these points are taken from his book. Again, kind of this is all around behaviour management. So thinking about the why behind the behaviour. So not just the behaviour. You know, why has this behaviour occurred? And give the kids the message that it's okay to be experiencing big emotions. You know, we don't want to be shutting down their big emotions. We want to be giving them a bit of space to feel the feelings, and then teach them that that's okay. You know, we can manage this. Repair with your kids if you think you didn't handle something very well. We're all going to manage situations in ways that we look back on and think, oh, I could have done that a bit better. Remember a compassionate approach to yourself and your parenting, but also a quick, oh sorry, mummy snapped a bit then, didn't she? Is a really good strategy too. Support children to calm themselves down. So they often find that incredibly difficult. If they're really, really wound up, sometimes we can assume that they should be able to calm themselves down. But quite often they need our help with that. They need us to show them how to do it. So soothing hug, soothing voice. This is a hard one to do, but trying not to discipline in response to our own feelings is really key. So if we're feeling really stressed and snappy, it's much easier to snap at the kids. And just trying to be mindful of that and put some things into place kind of preventatively to stop that from happening if we can. Again, not expecting too much from them. They can't be perfectly behaved all the time, and importantly, not being hard on ourselves. So some really, really useful little points to remember from Daniel Siegel there. Okay. All right. So in summary then, this is a really hard parenting situation to be in. This is really, really difficult. It's very relentless. We don't have the support around us that we normally rely on to get breaks and respite. The key to this is looking after yourself, taking pauses, taking breaks wherever you can, just having downtime wherever you can, in whatever way you can. Watching out for our expectations of ourselves as parents, making sure these are flexible, allowing TV, you know, don't worry too much about the television, thinking about the quality of TV and bringing that learning to life from those programs. Being kind and compassionate to ourselves. Just watching out for the way that we're thinking about stress and about the challenges we face, and trying to adopt that challenge mindset that's going to kind of set us up a little bit better than if we feel overwhelmed and we can't cope. And also being really aware that babies and children are attuned to our emotions. They're very, very sensitive to our emotions. They're going to pick up on our emotions, and it's probably going to impact on their behaviour. Soothing a crying baby or a tantruming toddler is extremely difficult if we ourselves are quite stressed. We need to breathe, pause. We might need to use those stop skills to regulate ourselves before we can soothe them. Use those ideas in the 5 to Thrive and Circle of Security to guide us in our role as parents at the moment. We know those are the important things to be including in our days, in our interactions with our little ones. And hold on to those tips on behaviour management if you can. Okay, so that's all from me for this morning. I do hope there's been some things in there that everybody can find useful, can take away. and wishing you all the very best of luck with it. Take very good care of yourselves, and please do email us if there's anything else that you think we can support with, or any questions that you've got after today.